Tri-Waco, the Greater Waco Chamber of Commerce's annual Olympic and Sprint Distance Triathlon will begin at 6:30 a.m. on Sunday, July 9th at Indian Spring Park. Over 900 participants are expected for this event. The race starts with a point-to-point open water swim in the Brazos River, followed by a flat and fast bike ride on the spectator-friendly roads near the river, and finishes with a run along the Brazos River through Cameron Park, finishing on the famous suspension bridge. Tri-Waco will again include relay options, as well as the aqua bike races. Online registration is open through Friday, July 7th, 2023 at triwaco.org. The Tri-Waco Triathlon is presented by Bicycle World. Again, online registration is open through Friday, July 7th, 2023 at triwaco.org.
Welcome to Purpose-Driven Sobriety. Thank you for joining the Purpose-Driven Sobriety podcast. I'm Christine, and I'm an alcoholic. I want to take this opportunity to thank today's show's sponsor, which is Jeannie Larson, who happens to be my mom. Believe it or not, when I started this whole podcast thing, luckily my family is very supportive, and they jumped on and helped pay for some episodes of the show. So, Mom, thanks. So today we have a newbie joining us by the name of Jason W. I met Jason on the intraweb. There are several recovery pages, on, for instance, Facebook. So if you're in recovery, be sure to use that as a resource. It's really, you've got to maybe kind of hop pages to find just the right one, that meshes with what you're doing as far as your recovery. But I suggest doing that. And so Jason when I started, I put out feelers, to have people on the show, and Jason surely soldiered up. And at the time, I thought, okay, it's a little too soon because Jason, first of all, welcome. Thank you for joining me today. Remind me, what is your sobriety date?
My sobriety date is 12/7/22.
12. Okay, so if I'm a mortgage banker, but I can't add in my head, so that gives you about 6 months.
Yes.
Coming up on 6 months. Okay, so usually in the past, this is our 14th show that we're recording, but in the past we've had people with quite a bit of time on, and I thought, you know what? If the whole goal of the show is to reach the person who's still suffering, right, in addiction, in the disease of addiction, and alcoholism, which alcoholism is an addiction. So I'm not sure what made me change my mind, Jason, but I'm glad you agreed to join us. And so, on the show, what we do is we just share what it was like, before, what happened, and what it's like now, even if it's been 6 months. And, it drives me nuts when I talk to people and they go, well, I just have 6 months. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's a flipping miracle to begin with, even to have one day. So make sure that, whatever time you have, you're claiming it, man. I mean, loud and proud, you're claiming that time, because it is an absolute miracle for us to even go 24 hours, So, Jason, I'm going to give you the floor. Tell me what it was like, what happened, and what you're like now.
Definitely. Well, I'd like to touch on the fact that, like you said, 6 months is a miracle. I had a drinking career that spanned 30 years. I never thought I would see a week, but the Lord has given me 6 months, and I get that one day at a time. So for me, the drinking started pretty young, 15, 16 years old. I thought it was, I want to go out and have a good time with my friends. But looking back at it, I noticed none of my friends were taking it to the excess that I was. I would drink enough, and then I would clear my stomach just so I could drink some more, so I could take that feeling of the alcoholism that the alcohol gave me even further. What I didn't realize is I was hiding from things that were in me. Some survival skills I had picked up along the way. I at a young age, I didn't pick up any self-worth, self-love, or self-respect.
Right.
For me, where the seed of alcoholism that I can far as remember back as being planted, I remember being pre-grade school, so pre-kindergarten, garden, and kind of living in a war zone between two parents that didn't really get along. But that old moniker of, hey, we're going to stay together for the kids, which,
Right.
yeah, that does more damage to the kids than they realize.
It
But I
does.
remember seeing my dad in Germany sitting down in a chair drinking, apple core, distancing himself from my mom, and my mom distancing herself from everything else. And that was kind of like, okay, that maybe that's where it picked up. But then you had to start. For me, part of my path to recovery has been, it has been my spirituality. It's also been my AA and the tables, but it's also been the therapy. To kind of dig at that root of why are you drinking.
Now, did you have siblings, or were you an only child?
I was an only child.
Got it.
Yeah, I had no other place to turn but myself.
Right.
But one of my earliest memories is remembering my mom and dad talking about getting a divorce, and I'm sitting in my dad's lap. I'm probably 5 or 6 years old, and I hear my mom say, well, I can't keep him. You need to take him. And I remember my dad saying, well, I can't keep him. You take him. And they fought about this for 30 minutes right there in front of me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So as a child, you don't realize that they are going after each other and not you.
Right.
But the self-worth and the self-esteem, unless that gets corrected, it'll carry with, living proof. I carried it with me for a lifetime, and I had more incidents like that with my parents where they weren't going after me. They were going after each other, but I just kind of got caught in the crossfire. Now, I do want to preference this. Doesn't matter who hurt me, why they hurt me, or how they hurt me. I was hurt, and at some point in my life, I had to take responsibility for that. Instead of saying, well, they did this, so that makes this okay. It doesn't make it okay. Unfortunately, I found alcohol before I could realize that, hey, there's something wrong with you.
Right.
You need to fix you.
Right.
So let's move forward in life a little bit. Get to around age 10 or 11, was sexually molested by a family friend. Another tank right there into the whole self-esteem bowl. Normal teenage years, 17 years old. My best friend shoots himself 2 foot away from me in the head.
Oh, wow.
So, you put all that stuff on your plate, and the generation that we were raised in was, there's nothing wrong with you. Just suck it up, move on, keep going.
Right.
When you take that mentality and somebody that's already diving into alcoholism, it is a mix for destructive behavior. And
so at 17, you were drinking too. Did you get involved with drugs, or was it just alcohol? But you know what I mean.
The drugs didn't come around until I was probably 22, 23.
Got it.
But looking back at it, I was always a heavy drinker. I would be in high school with a big to-go mug filled with vodka and orange juice. And if I ran out of vodka, well, my locker had a gallon in it. So, and at the time you think, oh, well, that's, there's nothing wrong with that. That's just, but you look back and you go, wow, that's a serious problem. Who's putting a gallon of vodka in their locker to get through 2 weeks of period of school? And what is so damn stressful about school? You have to have vodka. Well, looking at it, it wasn't school. It was what was going on around my life.
Yeah, you were in survival mode.
Yeah, but
you didn't know it obviously at the time, but yeah, that's surviving. Yeah, I get it.
When you're in survival mode and you've been in survival mode that long, it becomes a way of life.
Right.
It's not I'm just in survival mode. This is how I live. And somewhere after the time my buddy shot himself, I started being angry, very angry. And that carried with me up until about.
Now, were your parents divorced at this time?
My parents did not get divorced until I was 23.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was, if my parents would have divorced when I was 6, I probably would have been much healthier.
Yeah, who knows?
But you can't go back and say, hey, well, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But, it's one of those things like, hey, that's the one thing. Well, my first wife, we'll get there in a second, but my first wife, we divorced because we were like oil and water, and we had small kids, and we didn't want them to see what we were raised around. But so, got through high school, then, basically became a tradesman, a welder, traveled welding. On the road, you'll work anywhere from 12, 15, 18-hour days, 7 days a week, months on end. Your body's not made to take that. So that's where the substance abuse came in.
Got it.
It started out just to, hey, take this to wake me up in the morning, take just enough for this to put me to sleep at night. But it got out of control. And the whole time, that anger hadn't gone away. It was still in there. Now, sober, I had such a great lid on that anger, those demons. Like it was bottled down, just a nice tight ball that couldn't get out. But the minute alcohol, the minute alcohol hit me, somewhere in the third or fourth drink, that lid starts to loosen. And during my drinking career, that had always been a problem. I started out with looking to go to a bar or drink and just find a fight, like a dummy, instead of going, hey, why am I feeling like this? What is the need for me to drink? Why do I need to drink? And through my drinking career, I had periods of, I'm not going to call it sobriety. I'm going to call it being clean, because I still had the alcoholic mindset, even though I wasn't putting alcohol in my system. I was looking at that as, well, I can never drink again. I can never do this again. And that is just, for me, that was setting me up for failure, because it was putting a resentment in the back of my head going, well, you're eventually, sooner or later, going to find that reason to drink. No ands, ifs, or buts about it. I just happened to get lucky to be able to white knuckle through 5 years at the longest stretch. So, went on the road welding, got married while I was on the road welding, had kids, in and out of alcoholism. I tried my first treatment in my 20s, and it wasn't, the sobriety wasn't for me. It was for my wife, and it was for my kids. So, that didn't last very long. So it got to a point where I was sneaking around drinking. I'd be on the road. Well, nobody's going to monitor me on the road while I'm working, so I can drink all I want. Well, when you get home, you still have that habit.
Right.
So long story short, 6 years after we started our marriage, it ended. My alcoholism played a major role in it. I look back at it and go, wow, like if I could have known then what I know now. But, you can't really look back and say I would do things different. It's just, you play that tape, and for me, I play that tape, see the wreckage. I don't live there, but I turn around and go, okay, I'm grateful to be where I'm at.
Right.
I'm on that long road. So for my wife and I had 4 daughters. In the divorce, I managed to clean myself up enough to get full custody of our 4 daughters. A blessing, and anybody in their right mind would have cleaned up and sobered up. And I did for a while, but single parenting is tough. Well, I found a reason to drink. I found a reason to distance myself, from my kids. And what I wasn't realizing is the damage I was doing to my kids through my alcoholism, the emotional state that they would see me in. There was one time, and I hate to say this because it's not that it's embarrassing, it's shameful. There was a time I went out one night and I got so hammered I couldn't function the next day. And my kids were between the ages of 6 and 10. I've got 4 daughters. The youngest 2 are twins. Very, very blessed for those kids. But I couldn't get up to cook my kids dinner that day or that night. At that point, any functioning person would have gone, something's wrong. I need to get help. Well, I didn't recognize it. I was still so deep into the selfishness of myself of, I just want to cover this. I don't want to hurt. I was using an excuse, if I'm a single parent, I feel alone. And that's a big killer for a lot of alcoholics, is that feeling of alone, and I never really did anything to reach out and change that. So through that mindset, even though I changed a few things with how I was raised, I still raised my children into that generational cycle of alcoholism, and didn't know I was doing it at the time. So, you go through that entire period, multiple DUIs, still not realizing that, hey, I'm the problem, going through life. It's everybody else's problem. It's everybody else's fault.
Right.
It's not mine,
Right.
Doing everything I could do not to look at me. And, during these periods of being clean, I would find my way to God. Things would go good. And then, I would slowly and unconsciously pull away and not realize it, and pull away from that peace, or the root of that peace that I was receiving. And it wouldn't be long before I was back to drinking again, because of all the chaos I had put myself in, because of all the, the ways I chose not to handle my emotions, or recognize I needed to handle my emotions. So I get into my, I'd say late 30s. We moved to Florida. I wanted to learn how to weld aluminum. Went down there, started building fire trucks for a living. Loved it, absolutely loved it. Had the career going great. Kids were happy in Florida, and like in my past, I would find a reason not to be happy. Could be the littlest thing going on. It could be somebody didn't do this, and I would be building a reason in the back of my head to drink. And unfortunately for me, with the drinking, when I drink, I don't have an off switch. I want to bury that feeling. So when I wake up the next day, I'm so focused on the hangover and how hurting I am physically, that I don't think about the emotional, that I was not thinking about the emotional sickness, and at this point, my kids are getting into their middle teenage years to their young teenagers, so they can see what's going on, and it's no longer subconsciously picking it up. My kids now know I am miserable, and hindsight 2020, should have turned around and put my arms around them and said, hey, this isn't your fault, this is within me. But I didn't have that level of understanding. I didn't have that level of knowledge. And when we moved to Florida, I had intentionally moved away from everybody, kind of changed people, places, and things, but yet there I was, and I was always, and I don't like using this term, but I was a highly functional alcoholic. I was able to drink, go to work, come home, cook dinner for years. For years, I was able to do that. And we stayed in Florida for about 5 years. Brought somebody to my life that I'd known from high school. So I moved back to Tennessee, started a relationship with him. And everything was great at first, but again, I took me with me. So I was still the problem and not realizing it. And, for me, building that excuse, bad day at work, or you said you would do this and you didn't. I would find every little excuse I could to drink. And eventually that alcoholism wound up driving a wedge in that relationship. And, wound up, my daughters and I wound up living out of a hotel for 3 months until I was able to get financially back on my feet to get us into another place. So during that time, I'm working, I'm not drinking, I'm white knuckling it, just trying to get through starting to see some little changes over this period of time in my thinking. My thinking had shifted a little bit, not fully, but shifted a little bit, where I was recognizing, hey, I'm not drinking. I'm not thinking about drinking. I'm a little happier. I started taking a little bit more ownership of it. And I was happy. Kids were still kind of upset with all the other drinking, but that's to be expected. Um, and then I met my current wife. Uh, Came into my life. She wanted no other reason to love me than just to love me. Started out as a friendship. We built that up. For about a year and a half, I wasn't drinking. Um, well, let me rephrase that. For the first 4 months, 5 months, I wasn't drinking. So my wife met a really good version of me. Not the version I am now, but a healthier version than what I had been for a long time.
Right.
Just enough to get by, to look like a normie, to feel like a normie. Well, I remember this is where the descent started in the last round of my alcoholism that brought me to sobriety. We were out one night celebrating our exclusivity, like, hey, we're not going to see anybody else. We're dating at this point. And we were sitting next in a restaurant, and I had a shot of tequila and a beer. And before I even drank those, even before I ordered them, she looked at me and asked me, she goes, are you going to be okay with this? Is this going to cause you any problems with your sobriety? Because I'd let her know, clearly about my past and the demons. And I was like, no, it'll be fine. I'll just drink here. Well, that shot and drink turned out to, next weekend or a couple weekends after, going out and having a Jack and Coke, and I was a real big whiskey and bourbon drinker. And it got to the point of, it was 2 Jacks and Cokes, 3 Jack and Cokes. Then it was just 2 fingers of Jack and a water on the side. And over a nine, about a year and a half period, it escalated. It escalated to where it went from couple tumblers to where I would be drinking a fifth on the weekend, on a Friday and a Saturday, and maybe a pint to a fifth on a Sunday, and then Monday through Thursday it was pints, just to get through. Now I never crossed that boundary and drank at work, because I knew, hey, work's how I'm going to supply my lifestyle, so don't want to screw that up. Well, during that period, earlier I'd mentioned all that anger and all that rage. I got to a point where I was blackout drinking, where I would drink so heavy that I wake up the next morning and don't remember anything.
Mm-hmm.
And somewhere along that way, I started becoming abusive to my wife. Any sane man waking up and seeing the damage the first time would have gotten help. Anybody would have said, whoa, stop. I was so far down that path. I don't know if it was ego. I don't know if it was fear, pride. I don't know if it was a mixture of all three. It continued for a year and a half, up until the beginning of December 2022, and I woke up in jail after drinking way more than anybody should have on a Sunday night, and having to do 30 days in jail for putting my hands on my wife. Mm-hmm. First 2 weeks I call my detox period, where the chemicals leaving my body, where I'm separating from the alcohol. The Lord put it in me. I needed help. I didn't know how to get the help. We had been talking about maybe finding me some help and all that, and it just didn't happen soon enough. Didn't know how to get it. Didn't know how to reach out and look for it. Didn't know how to contact an inpatient service. Mm-hmm. None of that. And I put that on me, because maybe I wasn't ready. Maybe I wasn't looking hard enough. But waking up in that jail cell, separated from the alcohol, I only had one place to turn, and that was God. And pray. And, like every prayer, Lord, please get me through this. Please see me to the other side.
Mm-hmm.
I will do whatever it takes, whatever I need to get through this. Well, I set up a rehab at a Christian ordained ministry, rehab. It was Christ based. I get out of jail that day and get ready to go to rehab, and I get a call that my bed has been pulled because my insurance for work is going to expire in 6 days. I hit a really low point. I was thinking, hey, I'm going to hit this rehab. I'm going to get right for me. At that point, I'd realized it was about me. It wasn't about my wife. It wasn't about my children. It wasn't about the children she brought into the marriage. It was about me.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand how much of it about me everything centered around, but I knew it was about me. And so I get a hotel room for a couple days. Across the street is the liquor store. And I'm calling other rehabs, reaching out. There was a source that they put you in contact with other rehabs. It's a national hotline.
Mm-hmm.
It was a holiday weekend. So they weren't in the office that day. It was the Monday. And it hit me. Man, my salvation has been pulled out from underneath me, my redemption. I felt like everything had just been pulled. And I really thought about drinking. And this is something I haven't told anybody since that night. I thought about drinking. I thought about walking across the street and grabbing a fifth, of bourbon, whiskey, whatever, and drinking. And before I went over there, by the grace of God, the thought hit me, then what? So you're going to go through that bottle, then what? And in a moment of honesty and a moment of clarity, I knew that if I went out and got that bottle, I would have taken my own life that day. I was done. I was done living the alcoholic life. I was done hurting myself. I was done hurting others. And I didn't realize everything that I'm able to voice to you today and explain it. I didn't understand that at that time. All I was a big ball of hurt, negative emotions. So I called a friend. They were on the phone with me till 3 o'clock in the morning. And then I called another friend. And they got me through. 9 o'clock, the inpatient rehab where I went called me and said, we need to ask you a few questions. And then I asked, okay, well, financially, my insurance is about to run out. They're like, don't worry about that. They're like, if your insurance runs out, we will get you a super grant. We will make sure you get what you need to have taken care of. And my first question was, okay, I was like, if my insurance runs out and you have a super grant, do I need to go get a bottle of liquor and get drunk and come see you? They're like, no, don't do that. They're like, don't do that because you may not make it here.
Right.
But at that moment, I had my first sense of peace that I hadn't had since I was 10 or 11 years old.
Yeah, or even hope, which would, be the same thing, but just a hope.
Yeah.
Not even a hope of, not even sure what the hope was, but I get it, man. I know exactly the feeling you're talking about. That feeling of maybe I don't have to die.
Because, and you say that, but at that point in my life, that is the only other option I saw.
Mm-hmm.
And by the grace of God, the thoughts that went through my head are, you say you love your wife and your daughters and the children she brought into the marriage. You do this. What are you telling them? What are you showing them? How are you going to hurt them and affect them? The first moment of non-selfishness saved my life. And it got me through to get to that hope. And God was working in my life, and I didn't realize it at the time. I didn't realize it. So I get to rehab, and I'm very fortunate. I went to a dual diagnosis center. So yes, we're going to look at the alcoholism, but let's look at the driving force behind the alcoholism. So now I had to do 30 days in jail. Well, that's 30 days away from the chemical.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now I'm a raw bundle of emotions, and I'm starting to relive some of the stuff that I put my children through. I'm starting to relive some of the stuff that I put my wife through. Waking, even though I may not remember it all, I remember waking up and seeing the destruction I caused drinking. That's a tough pill to swallow. And when you haven't learned how self-forgiveness, that is tough. Because at that point, all I had was regret and grief going into rehab. And the best thing that happened to me was a counselor handed me a packet on self-forgiveness. And she said, don't rush through this. Take your time. Work a section every day, every other day. Read it, go through it, digest it, work it. Give yourself a day break. Read it. At the end of it, you write yourself a letter of forgiveness. Mm-hmm. So by the end of my we'll go back. But at the end of the 30 days of rehab, the last few days, my counselor wanted to see the letter. Who gave me the letter wasn't my counselor, but my counselor heard about it, wanted to see the letter. She started reading it, and she stops, and she hands it back to me. And she goes, I want you to read this out loud to yourself. The tears that came forth because speaking it out loud had a freedom to it. All my life, I could not forgive anybody. And what it started with was I couldn't forgive me. I never learned how. So if I can't forgive me, I can't forgive you. And those grudges I held on to, resentments all the way. I mean, just reasons to drink. Like I said, last year and a half, I could have had a great day at work, but I would build a resentment in my head on the way home of something that didn't happen. The wife didn't do this, or somebody did this, just to look for a reason to grab a pint and drink. And it could have been the most successful day in the world. Like when I say I had a marriage that anybody would kill for, and if I wasn't drinking, we didn't argue. We supported each other. It was the marriage that I always looked for, and God blessed me with it. But I wasn't ready for it. I was not ready on that level. And looking back, it's like, you had no reason to drink. I look back when my kids, they were children. I had no reason to be upset. I have 4 beautiful daughters that were well behaved, didn't get in trouble, did great in school. And I look back at that and I'm like, man, that's just self-pity and your alcoholism, your brain saying, I want more of this. How can I get you to feed me more of this? And that, coupled with a lot of other things in my life, it turned into full-blown decades on decades of alcoholism. When I was in rehab, my spirituality started to come around. That little flame lit, connected with that, with my higher power. I connected back with God. It wasn't real strong, but it was enough to get me through, to get me to the tables. So when I get out of rehab, I move into what's called Oxford House. It's a sober living house, kind of like a halfway house, but the rules are not as strict. Basically, you're responsible for your sobriety, and you're responsible for the guy's sobriety next to you. Because if any of the guys come in the house, if I come in this house and I'm drunk or I have alcohol or whatever, not only am I endangering my sobriety, I'm endangering theirs. So it's a system of accountability. And I'm so grateful for it, because my first couple of weeks in Oxford House, I'm still a little raw. I'm still a real big raw bundle of emotions. I haven't started the therapy yet, but somebody sends me, a real good friend of mine sends me this quick little link about somebody saying, you can't judge me from where I've been. You can you can't tell me who I am by who I've been, and it goes into the presence of God. You know, I don't want to be anywhere his presence is not. I don't, don't talk about the promised land if his presence isn't there. Talk about the pillar, but don't talk about the promise if he is not there. And that sat within me for a week and a half. And then it was like a spiritual bonfire was lit. And when that spiritual bonfire lit, it went so far and it started enabling personal growth. My personal growth started to develop. And, I say coincidence, whatever, at the same time, about 15, 20 days afterwards, I started therapy. Because in rehab, they kind of helped me identify some things I needed to work on. And before I started working with my therapist, I was just as brutally honest with her as I've been with you today. Like, hey, this is what you're getting into. If you decide to take me on, do you want to do this?
Mm-hmm.
And we did an assessment, and she said she loved a challenge. And I found a great dance partner for what was going on with me so I could work on me. I mean, the whole time, as my spiritual growth is growing, I didn't notice it, but I'm leaning on God more and more every day. I'm embracing even days when things aren't going my way. At the end of the day, I thank him for helping build my faith and helping build my hope. Thank you for putting me through these trials today because it's helped me build faith in you. Thank you for the faith that now builds my hope. Thank you for the grace. Thank you for one more day of being sober. Thank you for one more day of waking up sober because the day wasn't promised. And somewhere with that spirituality and that personal growth, I realized it was me. I was the problem. It wasn't my mom. It wasn't my dad. It wasn't my ex, my first wife. It wasn't my kids. It wasn't the guys at work. It was me, and it was how I thought, how I handled things, how I reacted to things. I would always have reacted to something very negatively. Now, if something happens that I don't really see going my way, I give gratitude for it. I'm thankful. I'm thankful for that little bit of adversity so I can learn whatever lessons in it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thankful. I'm thankful right now, the Lord and my God. My God has restored a relationship with two of my oldest daughters. I've been out of rehab 6 months. I went back to my same job. I have a relationship with my oldest two daughters. God has restored so much in my life through my sobriety. I'm so thankful for it. And as I'm going through the therapy, I'm learning how to handle what happened to me and how to heal from it constructively and understand, like, hey, this was your fault. You didn't have to put yourself through this, but you chose to. So for me, it's taking that accountability because it's something I never did. It was something that my drinking was somebody else's fault, but mine. And the tables, my sponsor, love the man to death. He allows me to figure it out for myself. And if I have a question, he will guide me, but he doesn't give me the answer. He's like, where are you at? Like right now, I'm doing a very, very thorough step 4. Like I don't want to have to step back into a step 4 and step 4 is to keep cleaning your inventory up every day. Step 4 is to clean that closet, step 4 and step 9, clean that closet out. Get that out there, figure it out. I don't care when I finish it. I just want to be thorough when I finish it. That way I'm as honest with myself as I can be. And my sponsor's like, hey, you know what, Jay? Doesn't matter when you finish it. You're not going to get a medal or diploma. Take your time. be comfortable with you, but just be honest.
Mm-hmm.
My sponsor, I called my sponsor up a couple of times in the middle of the night, not when I had cravings, but when emotionally I was distressed before I knew a craving would occur. And he's always been there. I can say my journey of recovery wasn't done by myself or alone. So I had I had a wife. My wife walked me to the path of my sobriety. Now, once I got on that path, I had to do the work. I had to walk the path. But it took almost an emotional death for me to realize that I had a problem, that I was, and I was the problem. It took something that severe for me to get to the point of I need help. And once I got to that point, then God stepped in. And I look at it now and things just kind of fell in place according to his plan.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe in coincidence.
Mm-mm.
I had that choice that night to drink. I chose not to drink. The rehab called the next day. Did my time in the rehab. Well, a week before I got out, a bed in the Oxford house came open. My job opened up. Where, hey, yeah, we'll take you back if you're working on yourself, and we want to see you working on yourself, or we're going to put certain limitations and restrictions on you. But everything happened step by step for a reason. But it was up to me to walk that path the way God had designed it to be walked. I remember in jail getting this feeling like you'll be okay as long as you walk the path I intend for you. It's going to be a hard path. It's going to be a tough path. There's going to be times where you stumble and you're going to need me to lean against. But you walk that path, you'll know joy and blessings. Sorry, I gotta get emotional here because you'll know joy and blessings you've never known in your life. You'll know a peace you've never known in your life. And last month and a half, I've begun to feel that peace. I've begun to feel that joy. And it's beautiful. And I look back and I don't regret what I had to get through to get to where I am, because that was my path. That was my journey. But I'm so thankful for where I'm at, because I couldn't picture myself not being here anymore. I couldn't picture myself not having God's presence in my life. I couldn't picture myself without a sober mindset, and for me, a big part of this, everything that I'm experiencing, I'm going through, I've been given freely. And, like we said, I'm only 6 months into my recovery, but I'm being pulled to a direction to share my story, because there's other people out there that don't have that one day of sobriety underneath them, and they don't understand how to look at 30 years. They see that 30 years as something impossible. But when I was in rehab, I saw guys with 2 or 3 more weeks sobriety than I had, and I understood it because I could see the path they had walked. It was so fresh. I don't understand somebody that has 30 years sobriety yet, because their path is so much further than mine down the road. I know what I've seen, and I can know what I can kind of see coming up on the horizon. But for those that are still in active addiction, I can look at them and be like, hey, man, I was where you were at 6 months ago. I was there. I know how you feel, but it doesn't have to be that way, and offer whatever support I can, and that was one of the biggest reasons I reached out to you the first time I did, was because I felt that pull. It was, I don't care about, honestly, I don't care about self-gratification. I don't care who hears my story, and whatever they think, they think.
Mm-hmm.
But if my story can reach one person and help them get to the table of recovery, anything I've ever put myself through in my life is worth it.
Amen.
You know, I'm blessed. I'm so blessed. You know, I'm blessed. Like I tell you all the time, when something comes up on the wall, like, hey, get out of my head.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's sometimes either thinking about the day before or that morning, going like, really?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you got to be, I saw this for God put this for me to see for a reason. I've got friends now that have noticed the positive change in me. They're like, dude, you post so much stuff on your wall that's positive. It's sickening. And I'm like, well, for years I did just the opposite. I was negative.
Mm-hmm.
I looked for a fault in everything. I didn't look for gratitude. I was like, now, it's like, man, either suck it up or put me on mute or take me off your walls. Because all I'm going to do out there is put out the positive stuff for other people to feed off of. I feel that I've done enough negative in my life. Now it's time to give back the positive. That's how I'm looking at life now. It's help my brother where I can help him. Throw him a life, throw him a lifeline if I can, but don't allow myself to be drowned. Because 6 months in, it feels really good to me. But I know that 6 months, if I let that alcoholic mindset come back in, I can slip and fall.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not grateful for these 6 months and the small victories and the small joys, I can lose it all in an instant. The one thing I can look at now in my life and say that I'm different. Where am I different than where I wasn't? I can see in life where I let the small happiness, the small moments pass me by because I was concentrated on the bigger picture of the future, where I was busy looking in the past. I wasn't in the moment. I missed so many things with my kids because of that. You know, I I never allowed myself to be happy in those moments. Never allowed myself to see them. I never allowed myself to be grateful. I was like, okay, you know what? I have a really nice house. I want more. I want more. Wow, I made $1,000 this week after taxes. I want to make 2,000. I was never satisfied. I never had that gratitude. I was never thankful. I was never thankful. And that right now to me is something I've kept big on, really big on. Once I realized that I had that lack of self-love, self-worth, and self-respect, once those doors opened, those three doors opened so many things inside of me. Because how could I love you if I couldn't love myself?
Mm-hmm.
How could I find the worth and value in you if I couldn't find my value? How could I respect you if I couldn't respect myself? If I didn't have those three things, I didn't have gratitude. I couldn't be grateful. I didn't know how to be grateful. I'm grateful that I can be grateful. And it hit me today. Wow, what a shift in my thinking. I am grateful to be able to be grateful. That right there to me holds so much power.
Mm-hmm.
God has put me in a place in my life where I can be grateful for being grateful. Even when things aren't going 100% the way that I'm going to use the word I want them, even though they're going the way God intended them and needs them to go for me to reach my destination and my path that has me planned. I can now be grateful that things are not going the way that I want them to go. That is such a freeing thought for me,
Mm-hmm.
and somebody else, it may be different. But it's like I say, there's hope. I didn't have to live that way. And it took me doing a lot of damage to myself and others to realize that. It took a lot. And I'm so grateful that the God surrounded me with the people that he did to bring the miracle of sobriety and self-consciousness, the self-thought and into my life. I have so much that I'm blessed for. And now I just kind of want to share it with those that want to or need to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful having a different mindset. It's beautiful to knowing that my brothers that I live with in this Oxford house, we're all here for each other because we're all facing the same, maybe not exactly the same demons, but they're all in the same ballpark
Oh,
and
sure.
would and would play ball together if we let them.
Mm-hmm.
But that is for us to control, and God has taken that out of our hands to control it. He's like, okay, here's your peace. Now, what are you going to do with it? You don't have to live like this anymore. I have freed you from these chains. What are you going to do with it? And I had the option of sitting there and being quiet, or I had the option to sort of share my story with other people. And I also didn't realize, and I know now I'm kind of getting into the centered point, but honestly, as recovering addicts, with people that are just fresh in recovery, we don't realize how we affect them in a positive manner. I moved from one Oxford house to another because I'm getting ready to transition out and have my own apartment, and I wanted to be closer to work. Some of the guys that I was living in that house with, I didn't realize how much strength, experience, and hope I provided, because when I told them it was coming down, two of them started crying. Mm. And I didn't realize that my actions, not my accountability and how I carried myself, helped those guys. And I didn't realize that. I have a friend right now, they're struggling very early on in their sobriety. They haven't hit it yet. And they sent me a message, hey, you are a really big inspiration for me. And for me, I had to respond to them, hey, it's great being an inspiration, but understand, don't put so much on one person that if they stumble and fall, don't say, hey, well, if they can't do it, I can't do it.
Right.
Like, just look for the great things in my story that you can use, because like sooner or later, I was like, you're going to be somebody else's inspiration, and that's, to me, is what it's about.
Yeah, well, and where much is given, much is expected, and it's quite a responsibility. I mean, it's one of the things that you said, Jason, regarding being at 6 months, and that you could lose that in an instant, and talking about the 30-year sober person, those fears, I don't necessarily want to call them fears, but that's a truth, that even at 11 years, I'm one drink away from exactly where I left off 11 years ago, and how raw and how easily you can remember what got you into recovery. It's the same thing regardless of how much time you have. And only time will show you that when you're 10 years down the road, it's like a twilight zone where you can like teleport back to that feeling of wanting to walk across the street to that liquor store, and but see, I think that's the beauty of this deal, is that we don't, as long as we work our program, we don't lose that, and that is able to be used to help other people, and that's fuel, just like you said, that's fuel for your own recovery, because you can't keep what you don't give away, right? So
Yep.
when you can share, and here's the deal, not everybody is able to talk about and share as openly as we do, as I do, and as what you're doing now, and that's okay, that to each his own, and you're in your lane and on your path or whatever, and whatever works for you, but yeah, this is a definite help to people that are anyone that's listening that's still suffering, to just know that you're not alone, to just know that you're that terminal uniqueness, that they don't have it as bad as me, but when you're able to tell your story, that it reaches someone else, and you're right, gratitude, man, it's impossible to feel any negative emotion and gratitude at the exact same time. Impossible. And that's why my sponsor, still 11 years later, if I get in a squirrely place, she's like, okay, tell me 3 things you're grateful for. And it's like, oh shit. Okay, well, air, there's a times where it's, but even then it's like, okay, well, that's a good thing, because air, you kind of need that. So, it just like whips you out of whatever funk you're in, to think of a few things that you're grateful for. But yeah, well, that's amazing. That's amazing.
Well, you mentioned something, you use the word alone, And for the longest point in my life, even if I was sitting next to my kids, my wife, I could be in a crowded elevator, I could be in a room full of people.
Mm-hmm.
I always felt alone.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it was a defensive mechanism, but, and I know a lot of us felt that way when we were in our disease. But the truth is, we're not.
Right.
We have people, whether we realize it or not, that were reaching out to us, but we weren't ready for that, whatever the reason is. And you got to a point of sharing the truth. I'm very open with what I have done, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because if I, like today, I was very open about what has happened between my wife and I. And the reason I am that open about it is because if I'm going to lie to you about it, I'm sure as hell going to lie to myself about it.
Right.
And if I lie to myself about it, there's nothing I can do to help myself or fix what's going on. I don't like that word fix. to acknowledge what has happened so it doesn't happen again.
Mm-hmm.
I can't hide from myself. But if I'm gonna lie to you, I'm probably sure as hell gonna try to hide from myself.
Right. Right. Well, I love that if you're on step 4, and that's, the blessing of a recovery program that we work, that's been around since, for 88 plus years now, is it works if you work it. And that's not just a tagline. There is action that has to go with faith. And I did a video the other day on this, that for people like us, faith is not enough.
No.
Faith is not enough. You've got and I was listening to a speaker, and he talked about this. You're at a circus, and you look up at this tightrope guy, and he's walking out with a wheelbarrow, and you've got enough faith that he's probably done this before once or twice, and that you've got faith that he's going to be just fine. But if you had trust, you would go up and get in the wheelbarrow. Trust is action. That would be action, going
Yes.
up and getting in the wheelbarrow. So faith for us is not enough. We have to have action with that. And that's if we are to recover successfully.
Yes.
And that is the program of recovery that we get to, not have to, because we don't have to do anything. We get
Yes.
to do this for the rest of our life. So even 11 years later, a friend and I, literally a couple of hours ago at my office, were just talking about having to perhaps go back and do a 4-step with this one situation that I'm looking at. And it's one of those things where I don't have to go back and do, put them on a 4-step and work that out through. But if I don't, I get to enjoy the consequences of that.
Yes.
Which are not good for anybody, especially me, but all the people that are around me get to suffer those consequences as well. So as long as I'm doing the deal, I'm not at risk of falling back into that, but I'm as at a point where I am as maximum of benefit to other people as I can possibly be. And that's where that even is worth working the program. But we have a medicine per se that keeps this disease at bay, which is our meetings, our literature, our sponsor, and carrying the message of hope to the person who still suffers. That's the ingredients that keep us in a happy, joyous, and free state if we do the deal.
Yeah. Well, I look at it like this. I'm so grateful and blessed. How many suffering addicts and alcoholics never made it to the table?
A lot.
That's God saw something in his plan that he's not done with me. And he brought me to the table. And I look at, this is my experience and my future hope. I went through everything that I went through and put others through what I went through, but there's no telling how my experiences are going to affect others in a positive way, even though they may have affected me negatively and others around me immediately negatively. There's no telling how somebody can draw a positive off that. The one thing that got me to the point of being selfish in my program, was if you've ever seen a wagon wheel, it's got a spoke in the center. It's got that big round metal piece that all the things that are coming off of it are attached. I look at my life. I am the piece in the middle. If I am not right, if I am broken, if I am out of shape, everything that's attached to me is not going to be right. It's not, it can be broke. It very possibly I could break it. Very possibly I could warp it. And that helped me center back into my program, going, okay, this is about me. Because if I am not good, nothing surrounding me is going to be good. And that really helped me really push my program to where I found that spirituality.
Right. Well, and they talk about in a comparison as well as when you're on an airplane, and should something happen and the mast things fall, what's the first thing you're supposed to do? Put it on yourself. You put the oxygen on yourself, because if you don't, you are no good to help the people that are around you. And such as recovery, and well, quite frankly, such as life, but especially we're talking about recovery. But one of the things you said, Jason, that really impresses me to know. I ain't your mama, but to know that you're doing the deal, and it makes me real proud of you. Is you said that you can look back and see where all of the bad things that happened in your life led you to this, to this recovery and to this life, and you almost, I get that, like, to my gut core, because it took me, quite frankly, I think it took me longer than 6 months to have a acceptance and an appreciation. For there's a lot of us that were abused as kids in a sexual or physical way, and mental, all of it. But to almost have just the acceptance, and for me I don't remember how far along I was. I think it was longer than 6 months, but I was sitting in my office and I was listening to another speaker, and he said there's not a single thing that has happened in your life that God could not have prevented. It happened for a reason, and your job is to accept it. And I remember hearing that and just almost falling out of my chair, just thinking, oh, shit. Wow. But why, and it's one of those things that in recovery as well, we hear, why is a question for management, and you're not management, so, so, it's none of my business why God allowed certain things to happen in my life, but I have a responsibility now, and I too would not take a single day of it back to have this life I have now. Not a single day of it. If all of that had to happen for me to get where I am right now, okay.
I'm with you on that, because right now, currently, I'm going through a divorce process. Like, one of the best people that could have ever been brought in my life. She's the woman that, like I said, walked me to the path of sobriety. But if my marriage is the price that has to be paid for my sobriety, I gladly pay it. Any day of the week. And that, it took me a while. It took me a while to get there, because I'm an alcoholic, man. I'm selfish. I want to feel good. I want the immediate. But maybe going through that divorce allows me to open up to help others heal.
Right.
To look at somebody else that's going to be in that similar situation 2 years from now. And I can look at them and go, you know what? It sucks and it hurts, but it's going to be okay. You don't have to drink over this. I'm proof. I'm proof I didn't have to drink over it. So maybe that is, why I was led down that path. Maybe, I don't know. I can't question it. All I can do is be thankful for that I got to that path, that I got to that I had somebody to take me to that point. Because honestly, if I didn't have somebody to walk me to that path and say, this is where you need to be, I wouldn't be on it.
Yeah, who knows?
I would not be walking. If I didn't go to jail, and this is another part about honesty. Let's just be brutally honest. If I didn't I am grateful I went to jail, because if I didn't go to jail, I would still be drinking and I would still be abusing somebody that I loved.
Right.
I was fortunate that I went to jail and God could open my eyes while I was in jail. And
That's profound.
I was fortunate that he could open my eyes in rehab. I'm very fortunate that the Lord has made me I'm a very self-aware person when I'm not drinking. And it's amazing. 6 months away from the alcohol, I can look at myself, and my therapist will tell you a lot of that therapy, I'm doing the work. I'm just bringing it to her going, this is what I thought this week. And this is kind of what I dug through. It's kind of how I'm working through it. What do you think? And basically she's my sounding board. And if she kind of sees me headed off in a direction that, yeah, maybe that's not the best idea to think like that. Have you tried this? She'll reel me back in.
Right.
But, everything that I have, I'm blessed to have because God gave it to me. Like I said, the self-will, self-awareness, the depth of love, the depth of compassion. Every morning I pray and ask God to take my will for me and supplant it with his own.
Mm-hmm.
And then I ask him to fill my cup with his light so that I may fill others' cups. And then I pray for three things: faith, strength, and compassion. That he allows me to have those through the day, so when I interact with others, I can show that godly spirit that was shown to me.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's been a big part of my sobriety. It's been a super big part of my sobriety, because where would I be if somebody didn't have compassion for me and my alcoholism?
Right.
And something else I'm going to say out there, maybe somebody's going to hear this, they need to hear. I talked about my wife, but the best thing my wife could have done was what she did, and left me alone and not contact me while I'm going through the healing process.
Mm-hmm.
Because it forces us to concentrate. It forces me to concentrate on me, not what's going on at home, not what's going on in that world that I need to fix. There may be an alcoholic out there that their family quit talking to them. Their kids may have quit talking to them. Their wife may have quit talking to them 5, 6, 7 months, however long it's been. That is the prime and most opportune moment to focus on just you.
If you allow it. Yep. If you take advantage of it. I know a lot of us get in that self-pity and anger and resentment and,
Hey, first 2 months, I felt abandoned.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Like, I am at my lowest. You said you'd always be there for me, blah, 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 blah. And then it hit me like a lightning bolt. You are being here for me,
Mm-hmm.
just not in the way that I want.
Right.
You are letting me have the space I need to figure me out. Thank you. I mean, if we're left to our own devices, we're destructive. But if we're in a really good place, we're left to our own devices, we can do some miraculous things with ourselves in our program. It's about picking that big book up, reading it. There's times I go to meetings. I don't like to speak at meetings. Because I got guys around the table that just dwarf me in experience, and I'm at the tables with some of those old timers that are like, just shut up, kid, listen. And I'm okay with that. But what you pick up at those tables and take home, and if you're left alone to chew on it and digest it and think about it, some beautiful things can happen if you're willing to just let it.
Write them down, man. If I could tell you anything, I'm sure you have a journal already, but if you don't, get it, and those nuggets, write them down, because you'll want to refer back to them later. Trust me.
I have several journals.
Mm-hmm.
I've got my AA journal, then I've got my therapy journal, because everything's kind of separate. You pick up different pieces, and then I have a big spiral bound notebook that I kind of combined them all in, and like, oh, so this is where I'm at. That's the big picture. The other ones are the smaller pictures that I put together in the big picture, and it works for me.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I would love to talk to you again in another 6 months and see where I'm at 6 months from now, and how my viewpoint on this sobriety has changed.
Yeah.
Because 6 months from now, I may not be the same person.
Well, and again, the 4-step, like going back to that. I mean, of course, when you're brand new, at least as as someone who's been in the program for a minute, I mean, you got to stop the bleeding, right? So
Yep.
even if even if you take the major ones on step 4, and obviously, what your sponsor says to do is correct, but I do know some people who really drag that out, and it's like, because you do have the ability to drag it out if you want to. But the beautiful thing is even when you close that spiral notebook on 4, the next day you can open it right back up and go, especially when the sponsor goes, we're back to 4, let's go back that doesn't mean you're going backwards. That's just part of the gig, man. 11 years later, this morning I'm talking about a step 4. That's
Yes.
the beautiful toolbox that we talk about, that you can pull that tool out and use that to get out of that tornado funk nightmare that whatever situation has put you in. That's a choice that you can go back and use that tool. So it's a beautiful gig, and I'm definitely down for seeing what happens once you get through the rest of the steps, for sure.
My sponsor, he kind of giggled when we started step 4, because he was like, "Hey man, you don't realize how far ahead along in this journey you are."
Mm-hmm.
He goes, "You don't have any clue." He goes, "But it's going to hit you sooner or later." So we started step 4, and there's a chapter 4, when it starts talking about step 4, it also starts talking about the other steps.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I'd read something and I would take it in and I would understand what he was saying, you don't realize how far along you are. And I'd stop. I love my sponsor, but he'd sit there with his arms crossed and go, huh, and just kind of giggle a little bit. Well, I did that about 5 or 6 times. And he goes, "Well, young man, what'd you learn?" I'm like, "I understand why you say that I'm further along than I realize." He goes, "So what are you picking up?" I was like, "I'm working all these steps at the same time and I don't know it." And he goes, "And that's the beauty of it." He goes, now that you know," he goes, "don't fall." He goes, "Because now that you know, it's going to be that much harder, because you were going to know what you could have had." And he goes, "But you're an overthinker." He goes, "So I'm going to let you chew on this for a while." And it was the best thing he could have done, because it allowed me to kind of back up and really kind of concentrate on my 4th step, because I was trying to make at the beginning of my 4th step, and I'm only a month into it, but I was trying to list every single thing, not realizing, hey, there's multiple things that I can box into one area here. Or talking about pride or ego. There's several things that I can box in there, and it's okay. I don't have to list them all. I just have to know where they all apply in my life. And that helped clear up quite a bit with it.
Well, and there's no, here's the deal. The beautiful thing about recovery is there's no right or wrong. There's no one size fits all. There's, as long as you are, living where your feet are, right? Which is in today, give us this day, our daily. So all we have is this 24 hours. So, and following the example and suggestion of your sponsor. And as long as you're being honest and asking for the guidance, you cannot possibly go wrong. And the beautiful thing is again, these are called steps. It's not an escalator. It's not an elevator. These are steps, and you can't do 5 before you do 4. You can't do 9 before you do 8. So you take them one at a time, and you sit with it until you're done with that one, and then you move on to the next one. And it's what is it? It's very simple. It's just not easy, because we want instant gratification. We want to, we want our diploma. Yeah, I'd like to graduate now. No, that doesn't happen that way, because as soon as we get up to 12, we get to slide down the banister and start back at 1 pretty much every day, right, of what we're powerless over, which is pretty much every single thing on the planet. So anyway, Jason, I'm so grateful that you agreed to join me today. And yes, I would love to visit this further, when you're further down. We'll stay in touch online, and
I'll definitely.
And if I can be of service in any way, shape, or form, you let me know. But I'm grateful that you wanted to share your story with the person who's still suffering, for sure.
I'm grateful that you kind of stepped out of that comfort zone. You took the chance on having somebody that was as fresh in sobriety as I am. So I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
No worries. No worries. God bless you, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to Purpose Driven Sobriety. Keep coming back.